Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere wild. Not just in history, but in terrain, in feathers, and in sheer baffling absurdity. Picture this: red dirt stretching for miles, the wind hissing through spiky brush, and wheat stalks that shimmer gold under a glaring sun. You're standing in the middle of the Western Australian outback in 1932, and something is off. You're not alone. There's movement on the horizon. Not soldiers, not settlers, birds. Giant, running, prehistoric-looking birds. And you're about to be caught in one of history's most bizarre standoffs. Australia versus emus. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this war with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far and cozy, drop your location and local time in the comments. It always makes this little world of ours feel smaller. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the dry crunch of gravel under your boots. It's hot. Not unbearable, but that kind of persistent, clingy heat that makes your shirt stick to your back. You wipe your brow. It's 1932 and you're on the edge of Campion, a farming settlement struggling to coax wheat out of this cracked, stubborn land. But you're not here on vacation, no one is. You're here because of the birds. The land at first glance is peaceful. Flat plains stretch out in all directions, dotted with skeletal trees, kangaroo grass, and rusted wire fences leaning like old men. But the stillness is deceiving. Because out beyond the fields, in the shimmering heat waves, something dark moves, shadows shifting hundreds strong, then thousands, and suddenly you realize you're looking at a flock of emus. You probably didn't expect your historical bedtime story to begin with a wave of giant birds. But here we are. The emus come in groups, tight, coordinated, almost military in their formation. Their necks sway as they move. Their feathers look disheveled, sure, but their eyes are sharp, calculating. They step over fences like they're not even there and plunge into the wheat fields with absolute confidence, like shoppers at a closing sale. The farmers? They're desperate. Their crops were already struggling thanks to drought and poor soil. These birds? They're the final insult. The emus feast. Peck, stomp, run, flock, scatter, then regroup. It's chaos with feathers. The damage is rapid and widespread, leaving behind broken stalks and eerie silence. Historians still argue whether the birds were migrating or just opportunistic freeloaders. Some believe they were drawn to the cultivated fields because of seasonal shifts. Others think they simply followed the rabbit-proof fence like a highway. Whatever the case, what's certain is this: over 20,000 emus descended on farmland like a biblical plague. And the government? Well, they were just as confused. Western Australia had been throwing promises at its returning World War I veterans: land, purpose, a chance to rebuild. What they got was dry dirt, high taxes, and now, bird warfare. Letters poured in. Farmers pleaded for help. They didn't want handouts, they wanted action. Some even demanded military-grade weapons. Because apparently if you can't out-farm a bird, maybe you can outgun it. You lean on a fence post and watch as one farmer waves a hat in the air, trying to scare the birds off. The emus don't care. One actually tilts its head at him like, "You good, mate?" Another pecks at the hat, fluffs its feathers, and lumbers off at 30 miles per hour. You squint into the distance. A group of emus breaks into a gallop, if you can call it that. Their movement is bizarrely graceful for something so goofy looking. You think about how the average emu stands 6 feet tall, runs faster than a horse over short bursts, and has claws on its feet that could end a fencing match very quickly. No one saw it coming. Not the farmers. Not the government. Not the birds. But in this quiet little dust bowl, something strange had begun. A battle not of ideals or empires or even survival, but a war of inconvenience. Man versus bird. Machine gun versus molted fluff. You take one last glance as the sun drops low in the sky, casting long shadows of emus across broken fields. They've settled in for the evening, comfortable, victorious, for now. You wonder idly how long it'll take before someone decides to fight back with more than just hats and shouting. You don't know it yet, but very soon the army will arrive. And you're going with them. The next morning, you wake to the sound of boots crunching gravel and a muttered curse carried on the wind. You're still in the dusty heart of Western Australia, and the birds, yes, the birds, are still here. But now, so are the men who were promised a better life. Soldiers turned farmers, war heroes turned wheat wranglers. You walk among them, boots heavy, shoulders sore, wondering how you got dragged into this feathery disaster. These men, many of them in their 30s or 40s, once served in the Great War. You can still see the way they move, deliberate, watchful, always half expecting gunfire in the wind. They've returned to a nation that promised them land and glory. What they got instead was soil too sandy for wheat, equipment too expensive to run, and a government that handed out more paperwork than plows. You trudge beside Private Allen, who used to operate a Vickers machine gun on the Western Front. Now he's trying to fix a broken fence with baling wire. He chuckles darkly when you ask how it compares. Well, he says, in France at least the enemy shot back. These buggers just eat your profits and walk off. And profits were scarce. The global economy in 1932 is deep in the depression. Wheat prices have plummeted. Farmers who once dreamed of thriving homesteads now measure success in how many loaves of bread they can afford to bake each week. The government, under pressure from both the farmers and a growing public concern, eventually offers help, not in subsidies or tools but in bullets. Historians still argue whether this decision was a genuine act of support or a laughable attempt at distraction. What's certain is that a group of soldiers, including Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, were deployed, with 2 Lewis machine guns, a few thousand rounds of ammo, and a vague plan: suppress the emu threat. Yes, suppress. Like it's an uprising. You sit around a crackling campfire that night, the flames casting flickering shadows across the soldiers' faces. They laugh, but it's nervous laughter, the kind people make when they're pretending something isn't ridiculous. Major Meredith reads over his orders, squinting in the dim light, muttering about containment and emergency response. You notice he skips the word birds whenever possible. The plan in theory is simple: find the emus, get close, mow them down. The reality? Well, emus are not cooperative combatants. You walk the perimeter with a group of men as the first mission unfolds. The wheat fields rustle with activity. The emus are here. Hundreds of them. They move like shadows, darting between stalks, shifting in groups. Your heart picks up. Alan nods toward a cluster about 100 yards away. Right, he says. Time for the artillery. The soldiers set up the Lewis guns, heavy, awkward, and never designed for mobile bird chasing. The gunner adjusts his aim. A hush falls. Then rat-a-tat-a-tat. The emus scatter. You watch, wide-eyed, as the bullets spray harmlessly into the dirt. Maybe 1 or 2 birds drop. The rest flee like a coordinated ballet troupe of feathery chaos. They don't panic. They maneuver. It's like they've read the field manual. You jog after them, out of breath after 20 seconds, sweat trickling down your neck. The birds, on the other hand, seem refreshed by the chase. One turns its head and blinks at you with the smugness of a creature that knows it outruns tanks. Later that night, the camp is quiet. A single dead emu lies beside the machine gun, feathers splayed in the dust like forgotten laundry. The men sit in silence, defeated not by wounds but by embarrassment. You nibble dry biscuits, sharing glances with Alan, both of you too tired to laugh anymore. By the 3rd day, it becomes clear this isn't just a bird problem, it's a pride problem. You're not fighting emus. You're fighting the ghosts of war, the weight of broken promises, and the absurdity of using machine guns on wildlife that couldn't care less. Still, the orders stand. You ride in the back of a rickety truck, gun mounted and rattling with every bump. The land stretches endlessly. You begin to notice how beautiful it is, subtle, empty, raw. The occasional gum tree twists toward the sky like it's asking a question. Maybe the same one you're asking, how did we get here? Emus continue to appear on the horizon, sometimes in packs of dozens, sometimes alone, like scouts. They watch. They wait. They vanish into the brush like ghosts in feathered armor. You hear one soldier mutter, "We should have trained him instead. Make him cavalry." The men laugh, but it doesn't reach their eyes. You fall asleep under the stars that night, the sky a bowl of velvet ink spilled with stars. In the distance, an emu calls out, a low, thumping boom that echoes across the plains. You don't know what it means. Maybe it's a victory cry. Or maybe it's just saying, try again tomorrow. You wake early, greeted by a pinkish hue smeared across the sky and the not-so-distant thumping of emu feet. It's unsettling hearing birds approach in a way that sounds like cavalry. The emus have returned. Again. Not that they ever left. They just disappear during the day and come back under cover of dusk like furry, feathered ninjas. You roll out of your bedroll, brush off the dirt, and check the Lewis gun mounted in the back of the truck. It's already dusty again despite being cleaned yesterday. That's the thing about the outback. Everything is dry, red, and eager to grind your patience into the soil. You join the patrol. This time the plan is more coordinated. There's word of a massive flock near a water tank, a bottleneck where maybe, just maybe, you can catch the birds in close quarters. Hopes are high. You can feel it. Even the normally quiet Major Meredith has a spring in his step, or at least a less grim shuffle. You arrive in position. There they are. Emus. Hundreds of them. They surround the water tank like it's the only bar in town. Some drink. Others strut. One appears to be arguing with a fence post. You feel it in your gut. This is the moment. You will reclaim the outback. The truck creeps forward. The gunner steadies himself. The moment stretches out like pulled taffy. You hold your breath. Then rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat. The gun jams. There's a long pause. Then one of the emus lifts its head, looks directly at the gunner, and, if you didn't know better, you'd swear it smirks. The flock scatters. Birds run in every direction. You try to follow, legs pumping, lungs burning. The ground blurs. The emus move like fish in water, slipping, turning, weaving through brush and broken fences. It's like chasing wind with legs. Historians still argue whether the emus truly exhibited coordinated behavior or if it was just chaos that looked clever. But to you, caught in the middle of it, it sure feels like they have generals somewhere drawing battle plans in the dirt. You chase one down a gully, gun slung awkwardly on your back. It darts left, then right, then vaults over a fallen log with the grace of a show horse. You do not. You trip. You fall face first into the sand, spitting out grit and pride. When you limp back to camp, your socks are full of burrs and your mood is even worse. A corporal records the day's efforts. Several hundred rounds fired, a few dozen emus sighted, 0 confirmed takedowns. Again. You eat dinner in silence. The stew is watery. The morale is thinner. Someone mumbles, they've evolved. They know. Another replies, next they'll be building catapults. And yet, you all return the next morning. What? Maybe because you don't want to lose. Maybe because it's the only job you've got. Or maybe because it's strangely personal now. You set up for another ambush, this time near a patch of scrub where the birds have been known to pass through. You wait. You bake in the sun. You swat flies. Time stretches. Then, movement. The emus emerge. Not in one big group, but in pairs. Trios. Drifters. It's like they've changed their tactics. You squint through the rifle scope and feel that same strange mix of awe and frustration. These creatures, these goofy, awkward, overgrown birds, are winning. You get a shot off. It connects. One emu stumbles, flails, and collapses in a heap. You approach cautiously, boots crunching over twigs. The others are gone. Vanished. Not even a feather left behind. And the dead emu? It's heavy. Really heavy. Over 100 pounds of stubborn, feathered mass. You and Alan try to haul it onto the truck. It takes 3 men and a series of undignified grunts. Back at camp, it's strung up beside the few others taken down over the last week. Maybe 8 in total. You've burned through hundreds of rounds, days of manpower, and the soldiers' remaining patience. You wonder, what's the point? A letter arrives from Perth. The press is catching wind of the operation. Reporters are using words like fiasco and farce. One newspaper claims the birds are immune to bullets. Another features a cartoon of an emu wearing a general's cap, holding a white flag as a trophy. You chuckle. A little. The kind of laugh you only manage when everything's gone sideways and all you can do is roll with it. Later that night, around the fire, Alan tells you something odd. You know, he says, they used to use emu feathers in army hats. Plume right at the side. You blink at him. Now we're using army hats to chase the feathers. He laughs. You do too. Feels almost poetic. The birds come again the next morning. Of course they do. You're no longer surprised. The only real question left is whether you're the hunter or the punchline. The sun rises and so do the emus. That's how it feels now, like they own the morning. You sit on the back of the truck, boots dangling over the edge, sipping gritty camp coffee that tastes suspiciously like someone boiled dirt and regret. Around you the camp stirs. Soldiers shuffle to their post. The Lewis gun gets another oiling. You're ready for another round. Or at least you think you are. Today's plan is different. The men have grown tired of chasing shadows. Instead of moving around, they decide to set up a stationary ambush. A flock has been seen frequenting a cluster of water troughs. If they return and you're quiet, maybe the element of surprise will finally swing in your favor. You hunker down behind some dry brush. The gun is positioned just right. There's a stillness in the air, the kind that makes your ears buzz. You can almost hear your heartbeat. Then there they are. Dozens of them, strutting into view with the confidence of animals who've never known fear. You hold your breath. The birds are perfectly within range. The trigger is pulled. Rat-a-tat-a-tat. Feathers fly. Dust kicks up. A few emus tumble. The rest? They bolt. Not in a clump like before, but in a scatter, zigzagging in every possible direction. Like someone took a bag of marbles and rolled them downhill. You try to follow one, but it's like chasing smoke. One bird hops a fence. Another ducks behind a tractor. You blink and they're gone. The total kill count today? A grand total of 4. You slump back into the dust, muttering something you hope the wind carries away. Major Meredith is pacing, red in the face. He's been logging every bullet spent, every failed ambush, every repositioning maneuver, which is military code for we ran out of ideas. Historians still argue whether the emus were genuinely intelligent and avoiding the attacks, or whether sheer randomness just gave them the edge. Either way, the outcome is the same. The soldiers look foolish and the emus look fabulous. A corporal makes a dark joke. Maybe we should try reasoning with them. Later that afternoon you help reposition the truck. It's heavier than you remember. The terrain is rough. Nothing but tufts of dead grass, jagged rocks, and the occasional sun-bleached kangaroo bone. The heat presses down on you like a blanket made of bricks. You swat at a fly that refuses to give up. In the distance, a dust cloud rises. More emus. You're starting to think they enjoy this, waiting until the truck's in a ditch, until the gun's jammed or overheating. Then they show up, parade around, and disappear before anyone can get a good shot off. You get a few rounds off, manage to nick a bird's leg. It stumbles, then keeps running, limping slightly but not stopping. You feel a little bad. Not for missing, but for caring. Back at camp, the mood is grim. You sit around a circle, eating canned beans with forks that double as shovels. A soldier reads aloud from a newspaper that's made its way out here. Birds 1, Army 0. That's a real headline. Someone groans. Someone else laughs. You just shake your head and eat another spoonful. There's talk of riding back to Parliament. Not for more ammo, but for clarity. No one's quite sure anymore who approved this mission, or what success even looks like. Is it 100 dead birds? 1,000? 0 emus seen in the fields? Even the farmers are divided. Some cheer the effort, others say it's just making things worse. After all, the noise of the guns has scattered the birds but not stopped them. And now, instead of one flock, there are several, moving in unpredictable directions. You remember hearing that during World War I, some soldiers painted faces on grenades, personalized them, humanized them even. It helped somehow. But now you wonder, do these birds have names? Do they have ranks? You fall asleep wondering if General Emu is out there, standing on a termite mound, surveying the battlefield with one unblinking eye. The next morning, a different kind of stillness greets you. Not peace, resignation. You help carry a dead emu into the shade, and you finally get a moment to study it up close. It's taller than you expected even in death. Muscular legs. Feathers that feel more like hair. A beak with an odd curve. You brush some dirt from its side and notice a deep violet sheen in the sunlight. Beautiful, almost alien. It doesn't feel like victory. You remember something Alan said yesterday? We're not fighting the birds. We're fighting ourselves for thinking this would work. And it's starting to ring true. The men around you are sunburned, exhausted, and now arguing about who gets to write the next supply request to headquarters. No one wants to admit it out loud, but the whispers are beginning. Should we stop? By the end of the week, even the boots seem tired. You trudge through the brittle grass, soles worn down and spirits wearing thinner. The air feels heavier, not with heat but with something worse, doubt. You hear it in the way the men talk now. Less bravado, more muttering. Less, we'll get him tomorrow, more, what's the point? You load into the back of the truck again, the Lewis gun clinking beside you like an awkward companion. The dust kicks up behind you in lazy swirls. No one speaks. The emus, for their part, have not let up. They still show up in groups, twos, dozens, occasionally hundreds, like uninvited guests at a banquet that never ends. They leave behind bent fences, toppled troughs, and fields that look like someone mowed them using a blunt spoon. You spot a few in the distance. They're standing on a low ridge, silhouetted against the morning sky. One appears to be preening. Another just stares. You get the sense, unshakably, that they're watching you. Today's mission is to sweep the valley. The emus have been nesting down there, leaving trails like someone dragged a sack of potatoes through the brush. The soldiers try to form a loose line, marching in sync, but the terrain doesn't cooperate. Neither does the wildlife. A snake slithers across your boot at one point, and you nearly invent a new dance move. You finally see movement, emus darting between acacia trees. The Lewis gun is unjammed and mounted on a swivel. You give the signal. Rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat. You blink through the haze. 2 birds drop. One limps. The rest? Gone as usual. Major Meredith keeps a running log. He flips through the notebook, shaking his head. 2,000 rounds, he mutters, and about 50 birds? That's not even 2% of the reported population. Historians still argue over the exact numbers. Some say it was 986 emus killed. Others put it under 300. The numbers blur, buried in military logs and the smudges of embarrassment. But what everyone agrees on is the ratio. Thousands of bullets to each bird. A mathematician somewhere surely had fun with that one. You sit on a fallen tree, wiping sweat from your brow, watching as a group of emus leisurely strides across the far field. One even pauses to scratch its neck against a fence post before vanishing into the bush. They're not just surviving. They're thriving. Someone tries to spin it positively. Well, at least we've given him a workout. Another soldier replies, we've given ourselves shin splints. Later that day, a telegram arrives. It's brief, blunt, bureaucratic. Operations suspended. Await further instruction. You can practically hear the sigh ripple through the camp. Some men look relieved. Others, offended in a strange way. You can't help but feel that too. It's not that you want to keep shooting birds. But part of you hates walking away from a fight unfinished, even if that fight was with the outback's most majestic troublemakers. That night, the fire burns lower than usual. The stars are out, but no one points at them. No stories are told. No victories toasted. Alan nudges you and whispers, "You know, I heard someone back in Perth said we should have just built bigger fences." You nod. It's a painfully obvious solution in hindsight. But hindsight's the only tool sharper than a soldier's bayonet around here. You think back to something you saw earlier that day, a single emu feather caught in a barbed wire fence. It fluttered gently in the breeze, defiant and delicate, like a white flag waved in slow motion. The next morning, orders arrived to withdraw. Pack up. Clean the guns. Leave the birds be. You help fold up the last of the canvas tents. They smell like dust and sweat. As you load the final crate of unused ammunition, a distant cry rings out, a low, reverberating boom from a lone emu standing atop a hill. You pause. It holds your gaze. Then it turns and walks away, vanishing into the golden grass. You almost salute. The soldiers begin filing back toward the road, boots dragging, some still muttering about the birds. Others just walk in silence. You linger, taking one last look at the land, flat, red, stubborn. There's something poetic about this place, even in failure. Maybe especially in failure. Australia sent machine guns after birds. And lost. It's absurd. It's embarrassing. It's history. And it's yours to carry now, tucked into your memory like that feather caught in the fence. Back in the barracks, if you can call a few wooden sheds and canvas flaps barracks. The soldiers begin to disassemble their gear. One polishes the Lewis gun, not with reverence, but with something closer to relief. Another untangles a knotted strap that no longer needs to carry anything important. No one says, "Mission accomplished." Because it wasn't. Not by any metric anyone wants to print. You sit on a crate, watching Alan carefully fold his uniform shirt, still stiff with red dust. "They'll say we were never here," he mutters. Just some lost footnote under miscellaneous failures. But the truth is, people do know. And they're already talking. In town, on the dusty streets of Perth, and even further afield in Sydney and Melbourne, the newspapers are having a field day. Literally. Reporters are printing stories of the Emu War with a mix of disbelief and joy. Some write it like a comedy. Others like a slow-motion tragedy. One paper headlines, "Australian Army defeated by flightless birds." You wince reading it. It hurts, but it's also kind of funny. You can't decide whether to feel shame or pride for being a part of it. The backlash at home is immediate. Politicians who approved the operation are now dodging responsibility faster than the emus dodged bullets. There are calls for inquiries, budget cuts, and, of course, jokes. So many jokes. A cartoon runs in the bulletin showing a terrified soldier chased by a smug-looking emu, carrying the Lewis gun in its beak. And yet, back in the wheat fields, the farmers aren't laughing. You meet one named George, who's patching up a gate that looks like it's been headbutted by a stampede. His face is weathered like the bark of an old tree, his voice dry as gravel. "They came through again last night," he says. "Stripped it clean. Again." You offer him a hand with the fence post. The two of you work in silence for a moment, the wind whistling through the wire. Finally, George sighs. "I don't blame the birds," he says. "They're just doing what they do. It's the land that don't care. It's a sentiment that sticks with you. Maybe the war wasn't against the emus at all. Maybe it was against the outback itself, wild, stubborn, unmoved by promises, policies, or machine guns. Historians still argue whether the government ever took the campaign seriously. Some say it was meant to be a temporary show of force to pacify desperate farmers. Others think it was a real attempt at a military solution to a biological nuisance. Whatever the case, the result is etched in public memory with equal parts embarrassment and affection. Still, something strange begins to happen in the months that follow. The emus don't vanish, but their swarms become less centralized. With the gunfire gone and the fields quieter, the birds disperse. Smaller flocks wander less predictably. The damage doesn't stop, but it slows. Whether it's because of the pressure they felt during the campaign or simply seasonal shifts, no one can say for sure. You return one morning to the area where the birds once gathered thickest. Now it's almost empty, just a few feather trails, some broken stalks, and the faint echo of what might have been thunder, or just your imagination. There's a bizarre sense of nostalgia rising in your chest. You think about the mad chases, the jammed gun, the dust clouds full of bird feathers, and the occasional triumph that usually ended with a sore shoulder and sore pride. The stories spread far and wide. Some reach as far as England, where one London newspaper refers to the operation as Australia's most curious conflict. You wonder if that's how it'll be remembered, an oddball episode in a country already known for kangaroos boxing and spiders the size of teacups. You overhear someone mention a plan to install larger fencing grids and even test new methods of crop protection. Electric fencing, acoustic deterrence, biological control. Imagine that, Alan jokes. We just had to outthink the birds instead of outrun them. You chuckle and shake your head. You're not sure what's more absurd, the war itself or the fact that you're going to miss it just a little. You walk the perimeter one last time, boots crunching softly over dry soil. There's a quiet here now, not peace exactly, but absence. The emus for today are gone. But you know they're still out there, bobbing their feathered heads, ruling their kingdom of brush and dust. You take one final look across the horizon. The sun hangs low in gold, casting long shadows across the land. A tumbleweed rolls lazily by, because of course it does. This place has a flair for the dramatic. As you turn to leave, you spot it. One lone emu standing on a ridge. It's not running, not hiding, just watching. You tip your hat to it. It doesn't blink. And then it turns, feathers rustling, and disappears into the tall grass, like a general returning to his post after a long and ridiculous victory. You return to base, but the emu war never quite leaves you. It clings like the red dust in the creases of your uniform, the kind you find weeks later tucked in a boot, or powdered into your journal. It's in the way your back still aches from bouncing around in the truck bed, the way your ears ring faintly when you hear distant thunder and wonder, just for a second, if it's a stampede of birds. Life moves on. For the government, it's convenient to forget. The official reports get thinner and more vague, as if the details might dissolve under scrutiny. The final memo from Parliament offers no grand conclusion, no commendations, no lessons learned, just silence. But among soldiers, it lives on like an inside joke no one outside the circle will ever quite understand. You hear rumors of a second campaign, a reconsideration. The emus are still damaging crops after all. The situation hasn't changed much for the farmers, just the tone. This time the authorities approach more cautiously. The public laughter still echoes. No one wants another defeat. So in November of that same year, yes, just a month later, they send the army back. Round 2. You return with them, this time with expectations lowered and patience already fraying. Meredith is still in charge. The Lewis guns are still your weapons of choice. The birds? They haven't changed a bit. But this time the strategy is slightly smarter. Instead of chasing large flocks, you focus on smaller groups. Less panic. More control. Meredith assigns more men, positions them better, and waits for drier ground to prevent vehicle breakdowns. You lie in the tall grass on the first day of the second campaign, staring at a group of emus gathered at a watering hole. They're oblivious to your presence. One of them dips its head to drink, then shakes like a dog. You can't help but grin. For a creature that's essentially a dinosaur with anxiety, it's oddly charming. The gunfire this time is more restrained. No wild sprays. Just short bursts. And something wild happens. It works. A handful of birds fall. Not dozens, but some. Clean shots. No jams. The troops cheer. Not loudly, but with that quiet kind of satisfaction that says maybe we've finally figured it out. Over the next few weeks, you keep at it. The kill count creeps upward, steady, not spectacular, but enough. The government eventually reports about 986 emus removed during this second wave. Some call it a success. Others call it a face-saving maneuver. Historians still argue whether the birds were truly beaten or just mildly inconvenienced. Either way, the troops are finally called home. The Emu War Round 2 ends not with a bang, but with a shrug. Back in town, no one throws a parade. There's no official medal for having participated in a semi-successful war against overgrown poultry. But you start noticing something new. People smile when they hear about it. They laugh, but not mockingly. It's the kind of laugh you share with someone who knows how absurd life can be and still keeps going. In a pub outside of Perth, you hear a song, a local folk singer strumming a guitar, half-tuned, half-sincere. Musical note, "Oh, the emu, he don't fly, but he sure can make you cry. We came with guns and bold intent, but he just ran and off he went." Musical note, you raise your glass. Alan mutters, "At least someone got a tune out of it." You clink mugs. Time passes. Years drift like the desert wind. The war becomes a footnote. Then a trivia question. Then a meme. The Lewis gun gets locked away in a dusty armory, probably still caked in bird feather. But you remember. You remember the heat, the grit, the strange dance between man and bird, pride and farce. You remember chasing something you couldn't quite catch, not just because it ran fast, but because it made no sense to begin with. Sometimes late at night, you catch yourself glancing out into the dark, listening for that low, echoing boom of an emu's chest call. Just in case. You never know when the next charge might come. You would think after 2 full-blown military campaigns the story would end there. A strange chapter closed. But no. This is Australia and this is the Emu War. Things don't just end here. They fade into legend, then resurface in even stranger ways. After the soldiers finally pack up and leave for good, the emus don't throw a victory parade, though you can't help but picture them lining up on a ridge, flapping their wings like confetti. No, they return to their usual ways, roaming, pecking, crossing roads without explanation, and demolishing whatever fields are unlucky enough to lie in their path. But here's where it gets oddly poetic. Despite everything, despite the firepower, the manpower, the sheer will of an entire government, emus remain a protected species. That's right. A few years after the war, public opinion begins to shift. People look at the birds differently. Not as pests, but as survivors. Veterans in their own bizarre way. You walk into a public building and see it, a state wildlife poster. A tall, majestic emu, sunlight haloing around its feathers, standing beneath the words, "National Emblem, National Treasure." You almost choke on your tea. Historians still argue whether this change in perception was driven by actual conservation efforts or just national embarrassment. But it's true. The emu, once considered a menace worthy of military engagement, becomes a symbol of Australia itself. Alongside the kangaroo, it's placed on the country's coat of arms. 2 animals that can't walk backward, meant to represent progress. The irony? You fought a war against the thing your own country now calls unstoppable forward momentum. You hear stories of schoolchildren learning about the Emu War in textbooks, tucked into a box near World War I and the Great Depression. Teachers often don't know whether to teach it as comedy, tragedy, or allegory, so they do all 3. You imagine a classroom full of 10-year-olds drawing stick figures with guns and enormous birds galloping past them. It's funny. Until you remember the dust, the noise, the feeling of running full speed and still being left behind by a creature that looks like a broken umbrella with attitude. Years pass. You visit one of the old battlegrounds, now a nature reserve. There's a plaque by the road and you stare at it, half laughing, half cringing. In memory of the Emu War, 1932, where bullets failed and feathers triumphed. It's real. A local artist even built a sculpture nearby. It's abstract, 3 rusted rifles bent into a circle, surrounded by a flock of emus cut from iron sheets, frozen mid-run. One of them has a medal dangling from its neck. You run into a tour group at the site. The guide, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a permanent grin, delivers the story with practiced ease. Yes, folks, Australia is the only country to officially declare war on birds, and lose. Twice. The tourists chuckle. One asks if it really happened. You nod quietly. Later you sit on a bench nearby, the hot wind tugging at your sleeves. A young boy walks past, holding an emu feather. He waves it like a sword. "General Emu," he yells before running off into the bush. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the rustling grass. There's something soothing about it now. You no longer feel the sting of failure, just the calm of memory settling into place. Like the dust that eventually covers everything out here, including pride. You think about how wars are usually remembered. Names etched into marble, dates drilled into history. But this war, this ridiculous, frustrating, oddly beautiful war, lives in the quiet spaces. In the pause before a punchline. In the twitch of a feather caught in the wind. Back in the city you pass a gift shop. In the window, among the boomerangs and ceramic kangaroos, is a plush emu wearing a tiny helmet. You go inside and buy it. You don't need a souvenir. You are one. But still it makes you smile. That night you place the plush emu on your shelf. It stares back at you with stitched eyes and a lopsided beak. Somehow it looks triumphant. You salute it. Not out of habit, but out of respect. You never expect it to become a walking trivia question, but here you are. It happens on a train headed east. You're minding your business, sipping weak coffee, when a teenager across the aisle glances over at your worn boots and asks, "Hey, you ever hear of that bird war? The one with the emus?" You look at him. Then deadpan, "Yeah, I was there." His eyes widen. He laughs nervously, not sure if you're joking. You don't clarify. That's the funny thing about this story, it sticks. It floats from town to town, picked up by radio hosts, dinner tables, school reports. One day you hear it referenced in a comedy sketch. Another, it's brought up in Parliament, followed by awkward chuckles and quick pivots to more serious topics. You wander through a museum in Canberra and see a new exhibit. There, behind glass, is a Lewis gun. Not one from France. From Western Australia. Next to it, a display of emu feathers and a placard that reads, "The Emu War, 1932, Australia's Strangest Battle." You don't know whether to laugh or salute. So naturally you do both. A family stands nearby, reading the description aloud. "Wait, didn't they lose to the birds?" the boy asks. The father shrugs. "It was more complicated than that." Was it though? Historians still argue about how to frame the event. Some insist it was never a real war, just a pest control effort with poor PR. Others defend the military's intentions, saying the emu threat was legitimately destructive. But most agree, it's a lesson in how even the best trained institutions can underestimate nature and overestimate themselves. And if history teaches anything, it's that overconfidence ages poorly. You move to the next room, past artifacts of actual wars. Rifles, uniforms, medals. Your boots echo off the tile. Everything here feels heavy with memory, even the lighter stories. Especially the lighter stories. You think about how soldiers from the Emu War received no ribbons, no commendations. No Emu campaign engraved on their service records. Not even a badge shaped like a feather. Just silence and the occasional raised eyebrow when someone found out. Still, you remember what Alan said one night as the fire flickered low. Every war teaches something. Even the dumb ones. So what did this one teach? For you, it taught patience. The kind you only earn from running after birds that outsmart you at every turn. It taught humility, because if a creature with no flight, no weapons, and no agenda can undo your best plans, maybe you were never in control to begin with. You step outside the museum and into the buzz of city life. Trams rattle past. Students chatter. In the distance, someone's playing a didgeridoo. Life moves on. But the emus, they stay with you. Later you find yourself sitting on a park bench watching pigeons peck at crumbs. A young boy chases them, arms flapping wildly, pretending to be a giant bird. His parents sit nearby, half watching, half scrolling. The kid stops, turns to his dad and yells, "Hey, I'm a battle emu." You nearly choke on your sandwich. You chuckle to yourself. It's happening. The story is slipping into folklore. Not with solemnity, but with smirks and sideways glances. The way legends are born. That evening you jot down a few lines in your notebook. Not a memoir, just fragments. The sound of feathers on dry grass. The click of a gun that won't fire. The look on a sergeant's face when an emu outruns a truck. You pause, then write. We brought guns. They brought legs. We blinked first. You close the notebook and lean back, eyes half closed. Somewhere out in the bush, the descendants of your feathered adversaries still roam. Maybe one of them runs through the same patch of land where you once stood, lost in dust and disbelief. You hope they're thriving. You hope, somewhere in their bird minds, they remember. 'Cause you sure do. You're older now. The boots are stiffer, your knees louder, and the war, that war, is decades behind you. But somehow it still finds you. At markets, on porches, in cafes where radio hosts casually drop the phrase, "Well, at least we didn't lose to birds." And every time you hear it, you smile into your cup. Because you did. And you didn't. You live near the edge of town these days. A quieter place. Somewhere between the sprawl of suburbia and the stubborn scrub of the bush. Sometimes at dawn you think you see one, just a shadow in the trees, tall and still. It's never there when you look twice. But you like to pretend. Your neighbor, a wiry man named Ron, has chickens. They're loud. Needy. Petty little things. One day he calls you over, swearing there's a bloody giant bird in his garden. You go with a rake just in case. It's a kangaroo. You laugh so hard you nearly pull something. Ron doesn't find it funny, but you do. Because once you did chase giant birds. With guns. And it didn't go well. You find that people ask about it more these days. Not reporters, but grandkids, neighbors, bored tourists at the pub. They lean in like it's some ancient myth. Is it true you were in the Emu War? You nod. Always just a little. Just enough to make them wonder. The story has changed shape over the years. It's softer now. Less about embarrassment, more about wonder. There's something almost sacred in the way people talk about it. An army defeated not by force but by underestimation. Nature didn't need teeth or tactics. It just needed persistence. Historians still argue whether that's the right moral. Some say the real failure was bureaucratic, too little planning, too much ego. Others say the soldiers did their best with what they had. And then there are those who think it was just inevitable. That no amount of planning can outwit 20,000 birds with legs like steel springs and the chaos of the universe behind their beady eyes. You head to a community event one weekend, a heritage fair. Booths selling lamingtons. Kids in homemade khaki uniforms pretending to be Anzacs. There's even a small petting zoo, though mercifully no emus. At one table, a man sells novelty t-shirts. You pick one up. On it, a cartoon emu wearing a general's cap and sunglasses. Text: I survived the Great Emu War, and all I got was this lousy shirt. You buy two. One for you. One for Alan, though he lives up north now and rarely writes. You'll mail it. He'll understand. Later that evening, a local radio host interviews a historian under a canvas tent. You stop to listen. And so, while the Emu War was a military failure, she says, it became a cultural victory. A reminder that Australia's relationship with the land has always been difficult. She pauses. And stubborn. You smile. Afterward, you speak to her briefly. She asks if you really served in that campaign. You give her the same small nod. Oh wow, she says, leaning in. What was it like? You shrug, thinking. You don't want to ruin the magic. But you also don't want to lie. So you say, hot, dusty. And the enemy was faster than we thought. She laughs, scribbles something in her notebook, and shakes your hand. You feel like a living artifact. Not a relic, but a reminder of something strange and strangely proud. You walk home that night under a sky so full of stars it almost looks artificial. The kind of night that only the outback really knows how to hold. It smells faintly of eucalyptus and wood smoke. And then, in the distance, a sound. Oh, rhythmic, almost like a drum. But not quite. You stop walking. Listen. An emu call. You're sure of it. You close your eyes and picture it. Somewhere out there, chest puffed, head high, calling into the wind like a king reclaiming his hill. And you smile again. Not as the man who lost, but as the man who got to witness something gloriously ridiculous, and lived to tell the tale. The year rolls on, and the emu war becomes more ghost than memory. It drifts in and out of the cultural conversation, resurfacing in odd corners. Late-night trivia shows, dusty encyclopedias, pub yarns told slightly louder after the third beer. You hear it mentioned less as history and more like folklore. But you still carry it. Not as a burden, but as a feather tucked in the lining of your thoughts. One afternoon your niece drops by. She's bright-eyed, 12 years old, full of opinions and half-formed questions about the world. She's doing a school project on strange moments in history. So, she says, pen ready, tell me about the war with the birds. You raise an eyebrow. Which one? She giggles. The bird war. The one you were in. You sit down, lean back in the creaky chair that knows all your bones and begin. You don't rush it. You let the story stretch its wings. You tell her about the dust, the fences, the first time you saw 1,000 emus moving like ripples across the wheat. You describe the way they turned as one, vanished as one like a living weather system. You spare her the mechanical details, the misfires, the weight of the Lewis gun. Instead, you talk about the silence after a failed ambush. How the men would sit around the fire, staring into the red glow like it held answers. She listens, eyes wide. You were scared? She asks. Not of the birds, you reply. Of the pointlessness. Historians still argue about that too, what the war meant. Some say it was a metaphor for colonial arrogance, for the limits of control. Others say it meant nothing. Just a logistical hiccup. A political footnote. But to you it was about humility. About what happens when man meets nature and expects it to move aside like a line in a plan. You tell your niece about the second campaign, how it was more effective, more restrained. You skip the kill numbers. They don't matter much. What matters is how the birds kept coming. How they never stopped. Did you win? She asks. You grin. They stopped the operation. The emus didn't. She scribbles in her notebook, tongue between her teeth. Then, that's so weird. You nod. History usually is. After she leaves, you walk outside. The sun is lower, spilling that honey-gold light across your garden. A breeze lifts the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a magpie sings. No emus in sight, not today. You think about the land again. Its scale. Its silence. How it can feel so empty and so full at the same time. You remember something Meredith once said, not during battle but later when the dust had settled. This land doesn't belong to us, he murmured. It just lets us pretend we're in charge for a while. You didn't understand it then. You do now. There's a peace that comes with that realization. The birds weren't enemies. They weren't evil. They were just part of the land, moving the way rivers move or storms roll in. You sit under the veranda, watching the wind play with the bushes, wondering if one day, some distant descendant of your niece will tell this story again. Maybe in a podcast. Maybe in a hologram. Maybe with emus that finally do fly just to mess with us. You hope they tell it right, not as failure or farce but as a reminder. Some stories survive because they're impossible to forget. And this one? It's too feathered to ever fully disappear. You start noticing something strange. The Emu War isn't just being remembered, it's being celebrated. At first it's subtle. A mention on the back of a cereal box promoting Weird History Wednesdays. Then a travel blog lists it as a must-know tale before backpacking through the Aussie bush. But then it gets bolder. A film student emails you. She wants to make a short film, an absurdist satire meets war documentary hybrid. Her words, not yours. She asks if she can interview you. You say yes because how do you turn down someone whose email begins, "Dear living legend of bird combat"? She shows up with a tiny camera and a notebook crammed with doodles of birds in combat boots. You answer her questions with a straight face. She asks if you ever felt like giving up. You grin. Every day after the first hour. Then she asks if you think it was all worth it. You pause longer this time. Finally, depends who's telling the story. That becomes the tagline of her film. It goes viral. Not world-changing viral, but enough that your nephew sends you a clip of it on YouTube captioned, "Uncle's famous now." There's even a moment where a cartoon version of you faceplants while chasing a bird through a wheat field. It's oddly accurate. You watch it all, of course. You even attend the small festival screening. A crowd of college kids laughs, gasps, and cheers as the emus outrun trucks again and again. When the credits roll, they clap. Not mockingly, affectionately. Afterward, someone asks you for an autograph. You sign it, keep your feathers clean. Emu War Vet. It doesn't feel like mockery. Feels like myth-making. Historians still argue whether that's dangerous, turning failure into fable. One camp says we risk forgetting the hard truths. The real struggles of the soldiers, the desperation of the farmers, the systems that failed them. The other camp says there's power in laughter. In reshaping a story not to forget but to cope. You find yourself somewhere in the middle. There was frustration. But now there's space for tenderness too. For irony and pride and a weird kind of affection for a time when everything made no sense, but at least you weren't alone. Because here's the secret no one talks about, there was camaraderie in that mess. Real bonds formed over jammed guns and missed shots and hours spent searching for birds that always seemed 2 steps ahead. You still get letters, mostly from students and amateur historians. One asks if you ever kept a feather from the battlefield. You send them a sketch instead. A quick doodle of a Lewis gun with emu tracks behind it. They frame it apparently. You meet a fellow vet for lunch, Sam from the second campaign. He's older now, sharp as ever. You sit under a gum tree sharing sandwiches and stories. Remember when that bloke tripped into the trough? Sam chuckles. With the gun strapped to his back? Sam wheezes with laughter. And the birds watched. Like judges at a diving competition. You both fall into a fit of chuckles. And for a moment you're back there again, covered in dust, out of breath, wondering if maybe, just maybe, the emus did understand everything. That night you stare up at the stars again. You think about the strange arc your story has taken, from fiasco to folk legend, from a botched military operation to a cultural touchstone that somehow explains so much about this country. Weird, wild, resilient, like the land, like the birds, like you. The seasons shift as they always do. The bush browns, then blooms, then browns again. Life rolls on, and so does the memory of the war you never meant to fight. At the edge of town they build a new community center. You're invited to the opening, not as a dignitary, just as a name on the local list. But when you arrive there's a surprise. A plaque. Right near the entrance. Bronze, polished, surrounded by a bed of kangaroo paw and native grasses. It reads, "In memory of those who served during the Great Emu War 1932. Not for victory, but for persistence. Not for glory, but for grit." You read it 3 times. A small crowd gathers. Most of them are too young to remember anything earlier than smartphones, but that doesn't matter. They lean in as the mayor delivers a short speech. She tries not to laugh as she says Emu War, but there's something reverent beneath it. Something sincere. You speak too. Just a few words. "We thought we were outsmarting birds. Turns out we were outsmarting ourselves." They laugh. Then clap. A boy, maybe 10, steps forward and asks if he can shake your hand. He's holding a notebook with a drawing of an emu wearing a cape. "Super emu," he says proudly. You shake his hand. "Well done, soldier," you whisper. Afterward, someone asks if you'd be willing to record a short story for the town archive. A bedtime-style audio history for the local library app. You agree. And that's how you find yourself, months later, in a small studio with foam on the walls and a microphone in front of you. "You can begin whenever you're ready," the sound engineer says. You clear your throat. The lights dim. You smile. And you say, "Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere wild." You tell it again, every detail. The thundering feet. The dust. The absurdity. The unshakable truth that sometimes the simplest creatures can undo the most complex systems. And the unspoken understanding that not every war needs to be glorious to be meaningful. When you finish, the room is silent. The engineer wipes at his eye. You pretend not to notice. Weeks later, you're walking through the local supermarket. A teenager in an apron points and smiles. "Hey, you're the emu guy." You raise an eyebrow. "Is that what they're calling me now?" She nods. Your voice puts people to sleep. In a good way. You laugh. That's a new kind of metal. At the checkout counter, you see something even stranger. A tea blend labeled Great Emu Calm. Chamomile, eucalyptus, and a splash of humor. The label shows a cartoon emu lounging in a hammock with dog tags around its neck. You buy 2 tins. Of course. Back home, you boil water, steep the tea, sit in your favorite chair. The one that groans just like your knees. You sip. You breathe. And from the trees outside, that familiar low boom again. Soft but sure. An emu call. Maybe not a war cry this time. Maybe just a hello. You're in your garden when it happens. It's mid-morning, the kind of gentle, warm breeze that makes even the weeds seem welcome. You're watering the rosemary, one of the few plants tough enough to survive your half-forgotten attention, when you hear a rustle near the back fence. Not a snake. Not a possum. Something taller. You straighten up slowly, squinting toward the trees. It's an emu. Not a dream. Not a memory. A real live emu. It stands just beyond the garden, half in shade, half in golden sun, neck bobbing with each curious step. You don't move. Neither does it. There's a long silence between you, stitched together by the soft creak of the windmill and the whisper of gum leaves. You nod just once. It tilts its head, then takes 2 steps closer. You think absurdly that maybe it's heard the stories too. Maybe this is some descendant, some long-legged legacy of the old campaign, sent to inspect the veteran of the other side. To see what became of the soldier who once gave chase, rifle slung, heart pounding, over fields that now bloom with wattle and wild mint. You take a slow breath and lean your hand gently on the garden gate. The emu doesn't flinch. It just watches. Come. Regal in its own shaggy way. You remember what Meredith once said toward the end. We came to fix a problem. The birds were never the problem. Historians still debate whether the Emu War was a turning point in Australian environmental thinking. Some believe it was the beginning of more ecological awareness, however clumsily it started. Others argue it changed nothing, just made room for a punchline. But this moment, this quiet, feels like something else. The emu doesn't run, doesn't strut. It simply turns, steps through the brush, and melts back into the trees. You exhale. Not relief. Something deeper. Like you've just closed a book that took you 40 years to finish reading. Later you tell Alan about it in a letter. They're still out there, you write. But I think we've reached a truce. He writes back 2 weeks later in big crooked handwriting. Good. We lost the war, but maybe we won the respect. You keep the letter on your desk. You spend more time in the garden now. You plant native shrubs. You build a small bird bath even though emus probably wouldn't use it. Still you hope. Sometimes, you even sit out there with your tea and notebook, scribbling lines of poetry that rhyme too easily and never quite finish. You start each one the same way. There once was a bird we couldn't outgun. They never go past the 3rd line, but it doesn't matter. You're not writing for history books anymore. You're writing because it feels right. At the back of the property near the old shed, you place a small sign. Not official. Just a plank of wood carefully carved. Here stood the last soldier to salute a bird. You don't tell anyone, but you check it every now and then to make sure the lettering hasn't faded. That evening, as the sky turns to watercolor, you hear it again. The soft thump of distant emu feet. Just one. Then silence. No charge. No retreat. Just the echo of something once wild, still wild, and somehow at peace. It's late now. The kind of late where the crickets take over the airwaves, and every light you forgot to switch off hums like a lullaby. You're sitting by the window, the same one you always lean against when the night stretches out longer than your thoughts. The house creaks like it remembers everything. You look around. Familiar walls. Familiar dust. A life lived fully, even if not always gloriously. Photos line the shelves. People you fought beside, people you laughed with, people you loved. And one tiny plush emu, still perched proudly on the mantel, helmet slightly askew. You sip your tea. Across the room, the radio hums a low, static lullaby. The announcer is reading sleep stories tonight. You catch a sentence drifting in, and in 1932, a most peculiar war was fought. You smile. It always finds you, doesn't it? But this time, you let it wash over you, like an old song that no longer demands your attention, just your presence. Outside, the stars are clear. No moon tonight. Just that endless black peppered with ancient light. Somewhere out there, maybe on the far side of the ridge, a bird moves through the brush unnoticed. Or maybe not. Maybe the night is empty. And maybe that's okay. Historians still argue whether the Emu War taught anything useful. Some say it's a cautionary tale about policy or pride or pest control gone rogue. But you've always known the truth was simpler. It wasn't about winning. It was about learning when to stop chasing. You rise from the chair and shuffle toward the bedroom, joints clicking like old latches. The hallway's quiet. The air smells like lavender and old wood. A fan hums gently, stirring the curtains like a breath. You pause by the mirror. Your reflection looks back, older, softer. But the eyes? They still squint like they're watching a dust cloud rise in the wheat. You nod once to yourself. Because you did your part. And the birds? Well, they did theirs too. You slip into bed, sheets cool and soft, body heavy and that peaceful kind of tired. You pull the blanket up to your chest, sigh once, then turn onto your side. Your last thought before drifting off isn't about bullets or battle plans or blunders. It's of feathers. Just feathers. Falling gently on a breeze that knows where it's going. And now, as the dust settles across the outback once more, you let your thoughts slow. Let your breath ease into rhythm, soft, even. You picture the red plains stretching under a pale sky, the low rustle of wind through grass that's danced with history and silence in equal measure. You imagine the emus, striding not in defiance, not in triumph, but simply because that's what they do. They run. They live. And they remind us, in the most unexpected ways, that not everything needs conquering. The world is wide. Not everything must be solved. Some things just are. The soil, the sky, the shimmer of heat on a distant hill, they don't care about medals or missteps or headlines. They offer no judgment. Only space. Only stillness. And in that stillness you find rest. You feel the weight of the day slide gently off your shoulders, like dust brushing from a coat. The warmth of your blanket. The whisper of the fan. The quiet hush of a night that expects nothing from you but peace. You've walked through history. You've chased the absurd and met it with grace. And now, you rest. Let your thoughts drift like feathers on a breeze. No need to chase them. They'll come back tomorrow. But for now, sleep.